quick introductions if you haven't seen any of the presentations this week. My name is Renee Minnich, and I'm one of the college consultants at Educational Connections. Prior to joining EC, I worked in college admissions for over 30 years, and the bulk of my career was spent at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where I was a senior associate director of admission, and I also sat on their admissions committee. So that really helped me gain a lot of information about the college application process. Marybeth, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Yes, I'm Marybeth Lybrand, and I'm a college counselor um, here at EC, and also a writing coach. And I have a background in college admissions at the University of California, Santa Cruz, as well as years spent as a professor at the college level, and academic advisor.
That's one of the things I love about college consultants, Mary Beth, is that we all bring a little bit of a different background and information to the table. And so I love working sort of in a team as well, so we can share some of that information with each other and also guide our students in the best way possible. So before we get started, for those of you who have just joined us, I want to remind you that today we don't have a formal presentation set. We're just going to be answering your questions. I know we weren't able to get to all of them on the presentation days this week. So today we're ready to tackle any questions that were left over or maybe came up for you as you thought about the different presentations that we did earlier. So please feel free to use the Q&A function and go ahead and put your questions in there. We already have a number of them coming in. So we're going to dive in and get started on those. So let's start with the first one. Are you ready, Mary Beth?
Yes,
Okay.
let's do it.
So the first question is, how hard do you push a kid who isn't super motivated on their own? This is a great question because I think this is quite common. I want to push some, but not too much. And how do you know the happy medium? Are you okay if I start with that one, Mary Beth?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So first, let me talk about students who aren't super motivated on their own. And I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the week. Sometimes it's not that the student isn't motivated, it's that they're feeling anxious and they don't know how to start.
Mhm.
So if I have a student, when I'm meeting with students, one of the first questions I ask them, the very first meeting is, how are you feeling about the college search and application process? Tell me, be honest. So we talk that through. Then we have our full first meeting, and at the end, I almost always ask them, how are you feeling now? And 99% of the time they say, oh, so much better. It's because they just needed to talk it through with someone, to talk about what should be done, how to do it. And that takes some of the anxiety away and might motivate them to move forward in the process. I agree, pushing too much can be challenging because there is some resistance there and saying, okay, you're making me do this. I'm not ready. I'll do it on my own time. I have two children. I have been through this college search and application process with them. And I know that happened with my two as well. So finding the happy medium, I think, is difficult. I don't have a perfect answer for that, but I will say open up conversations with your child. Talk about how they're feeling, talk about how they might want to move forward with the intention that we need to move forward. So let's have a conversation about how and when that might feel comfortable for you. The other recommendation I have is to set aside designated time for the discussion or to work on college counseling and college search. And because otherwise it's very easy to say, oh, we'll talk about it tomorrow, or let's talk about it next week. I know my kids said that to me all the time, not today. How about tomorrow? So if we set a time saying, okay, Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, let's sit down and write down the things that are important to you in a college or what you're interested in. That sort of starts the conversation, and doing it a little bit at a time instead of trying to do everything at once, I think is also important as well. Anything you want to add to that, Mary Beth, or are you feeling pretty
Yeah,
good?
no, I would just add some of the things that we talked about on Tuesday. Really looking at, are they just, where is it breaking down? Do they fear failure?
Hmm.
Is it something that they're not sort of authentically interested in? Might they be more
Hmm.
motivated if they find something that that they're really able to take charge of? So where is sort of where is it breaking down, and how can you support that student to really sort of be in the driver's seat?
Yes, yes. Help
Mhm.
them feel empowered. I think that
Right,
makes a big difference.
right.
So the next question is, where is the best place in the college application to explain any circumstances that affect your grades, activities, etc.? And this could be dyslexia, other learning differences, health issues. Is the essay the place to write that? Is there somewhere else that it should be addressed? Would you like to tackle that one, Mary Beth?
I would say that the best place to, well, first of all, you want to address everything. I have some students or parents who say, well, that's not really important to put in the application. You can't assume that the application reader is going to understand it. You need to give them as clear and comprehensive a picture as possible. So put everything in there that you think is necessary. Additional comments is the obvious place to put it, and probably the best place to put anything that you want to add to give that reader of the application, again, a more just complete picture. You can certainly write about it in the essay if it's something that's been, really affected your journey. So I think it could go either place. You just want to make sure that the essay is used as a place to really shine, and to really give the reader more information beyond what's in the application itself. So if you're addressing learning differences, if you're addressing things in additional comments, you don't need to necessarily duplicate it. You want to understand that every bit of that application is valuable real estate, and you want to give as much and as complete information as possible.
I absolutely agree. And I love what you said, how everything is good real estate, because I have seen students say the same thing in multiple places. So there is in the Common App, there's sort of three sections. One is the main Common App essay, and then there's a challenges and circumstances section, and then there's an additional information section. So I typically tell students, if they want to include that information, and including that type of information, I always saw it as an explanation, not as an excuse. So I agree, including it is very helpful. If you don't include that information, the college admissions officers have to make assumptions about why your grades dropped, and the assumption will likely be this work was too challenging for them. So you want to provide them with that extra information. And then the challenges and circumstances box was built purposely for this. So I typically tell students, use your essay to talk about one thing, use challenges and circumstances to talk about this. And if you have anything additional under additional information, use that. Some students will not use the challenges and circumstances box or the additional information box, and that's completely fine. But that's what they're there for. They're there so that students can utilize them on their application and not have to use the essay as part of that. The only sort of caveat to that is that the challenges and circumstances box and the additional information box are very limited in the number of words you can use. So if you have a very long explanation that you want to share, you may need to utilize the essay for that. Do you have any suggestions of resources, websites, etc., for information about scholarships and financial aid? And when do you suggest we submit the FAFSA? Mary Beth and I were actually just having a conversation about financial aid prior to signing on to this webinar. And financial aid is a complicated process. And it is not something that either of us really say are our area of expertise, although I know absolutely the basics of it and can guide a family into the process and talk about the differences between merit aid as opposed to need-based aid. And so I typically tell families when I'm working with them is to go right to the FAFSA website. They have a great information section on there about how to fill it out, of some Q&A, and I think that's always a good resource. That financial aid and the FAFSA information changes every single year, so it is really, really important to read that year's information instead of listening to what maybe other families have done in the past. And in addition to that, when we submit the FAFSA, I always say submit it as soon as it's available. It comes out at different times every year, depending on how many updates and changes they are making. A couple years ago, it came out very, very late. Last year, it came out very early. So you really have to sort of keep an eye on when it is available. And I encourage families to fill it out as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I would like to say that college is kind of one of the only places where you don't really know what the actual cost is going to be until you're in. You don't know that sticker price. So really looking at that net price calculator that you'll get, you don't know what they're going to offer in terms of aid, and you can also say to a school, and I know this isn't your specific question, but if school A is the school that you really want to go to, but school B is giving a better package, you can let school A know that they're giving
Hmm.
a better package, and maybe they'll meet it if they really want you to come to their campus. So there's different things that you can do.
I agree. I think that's a really great point, Mary Beth, because you really want to compare the bottom line numbers. So one school may be more expensive, but they may offer you more aid.
Right.
Another school may be less expensive, offer you less, and the less expensive school, the bottom line number is higher. So you really want to be able to compare apples to apples, and that typically is farther along in
Right.
the process. And I agree, most colleges, not the highly selective schools, but many colleges will do competitive appeals. So you really do want to reach out if that school is very high on your child's list.
Yeah, and I think for websites, that part of the question, I really like to use
Mm,
Futures for that. They have a lot of really great information that's searchable
yes.
on scholarships.
I'm sorry. Did you say big futures? I just want to make sure everyone heard
Yep.
that correctly.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay. The next question. I love just a Q and A time. Like this is, this is great to see so many different topics coming up. What is the expected increase in test scores from the PSAT or the first test and then the second or third test on both the SAT or the ACT? I'd like an average and an optimistic, please. I think those are great questions. Well, first, let me say this. The PSAT can be a little bit challenging because it is first typically given in sophomore year, and many students are taking Algebra 2 at that time. And Algebra 2 is really a benchmarker for your ability to do well on an SAT or an ACT. So if a student has just started taking Algebra 2, they may see a little bit lower of a score on that PSAT. And then if they take the SAT the following year with Algebra 2 under their belts, you may see an increase. I typically tell students, a 100-point increase is realistic if you, between your second and third one, or your first and second one, if you take the feedback from how well you did on your first one and really apply it. And say, okay, I know I was lower in this area or higher in this area. I want to concentrate on it. I'm not talking about if you just take it and then you take it unprepared again the second time. I think you can expect a very similar score. But if you do test prep between the first and second, I do think a 100-point rise is realistic and possible.
Yeah, definitely. And
Okay,
the approach to studying too, it depends on what you're doing during that time.
correct.
Mhm.
Correct. Pete and I talked about this a little bit yesterday and the differences in test prep approach. And one of the things that we did say is that, especially if you are going to take it a third time, really thinking about how am I changing my test prep approach for the third time, as opposed to the first or second, because you can't expect to do the same type of approach every single time and expect different results. You want to think about what scores you received, where you were high, where you were lower, how to approach it. And sometimes that is why it is helpful to have a test prep coach to guide you through that. I've had students where I've said, what are you doing for test prep? And they will say, okay, I'm going to do it on my own. And then I say, okay, what's your plan? And they lay it out for me. Every Saturday, I'm setting aside an hour and I'm using it. Like they have a very solid plan. And I feel confident in that student doing their own test prep. I've had other students, I've said, how you can approach it? And they said, I don't even know where to start. So I can help them with where to start and how to find some of those resources, but it also depends on the student. Are they a really good, organized student who will set aside time and is very good at prep for other classes, or do they prefer to have someone help guide them through the process? Can you please speak about the best way to navigate accommodations during the admissions process as well as during the college selection process? Do you want to try to tackle that one, Mary Beth?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the main thing for accommodations as far as being a benefit in the process is extended test time. So if you've got a 504, you have an IEP, you definitely want to look into getting the extended test time for the ACT or the SAT. College admissions people generally at most schools are not going to use that, your accommodation, your 504 or your IEP in their decision, unless it's a school that's like a landmark college in Vermont, for example,
Right.
where it's really set up for students with learning differences. So So schools are going to be a little bit different, but again, generally schools are not going to include that in their admissions decision, nor will they see the information unless you specify it in your
Right.
essay, for example. But again, they're not going to take that into account. And then as far as it's a little bit further on, but having a transition plan, one of the main differences I think that students aren't aware of, that families aren't aware of, that those accommodations in high school where they are presented to you, you have a 504, all of that's given to you. You have to seek that out in college. So the student needs to contact the Office of Disability Services and get their accommodations met at the college level. So there's a difference. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
But I would say for test time, it's the most important when you're in high school.
And I think as part of the application process, I think it's great to have those questions. I typically ask students, I know what you've had for accommodations in high school. What are you looking for accommodations in a college? And to be honest, oftentimes what the parent thinks they should be looking for and what the student it says they're going to look for are not always the same thing either. So I want to make sure I'm building a list that has accommodations available. And then before they select a college, many times seniors I'll meet again in senior year once they've received their admission decisions, before they make a final selection, really doing some research on what is available at that school and how easy those accommodations are to get. And especially if a student needs a high level of support, making sure that that high level of support is available at that school, because at times those can be a limited number of spaces and maybe an additional charge even beyond tuition if they're looking for that. So there are some questions you need to ask before you make that final decision. But also having that conversation of, okay, you've had this in high school. Do you feel as a student you'll need it in college? And one of the things I tell students when at times they're resistant to it is at the very least, know where the academic support service offices is. Know what is available, know if there's a drop-in if you need help. Just put some tools in your toolbox. So if you need one, you can reach in there and grab it. So because you want to make sure you're setting yourself up for success in college as well. What is the best when is the best time to tour a college campus? It seems the admissions tours fill up months in advance for some of these campuses. Who to reach out to for a tour if those are filled already? So this is a great question. And I know I'm talking to a lot of my students right now about spring visits. A lot of families are thinking, okay, what are we doing this spring? What are we doing this summer? And, I think visiting anytime the school is in session is amazing. Taking a tour, having a current student giving you the tour, seeing what the campus feels like when it's full of students and vibrant. You can really sort of get the vibe of campus. You can see how busy things are. One of the reasons I picked the college I did, I remember this from so long ago. When I took the tour and I walked across campus, almost every person looked me in the eye and said hello. And that was so impactful to me. I felt so welcomed. And I think even things like that, which can be such a small thing, can really change how a student feels about a college campus. So I do recommend going when school is in session if possible. Now, of course, the summer is a wonderful time. Lots of people are traveling and they want to go to college campuses as well. Also a great time. You can go to a campus during the summer and take tours. That's completely fine. But know that if your child is admitted to that school, you may want to go back a second time and look at it when the campus is full and do another tour once they have been admitted. Looking at a college when you're admitted is totally different than looking at a college when it's on your possible list. I agree that some of these colleges tours will fill up months in advance, especially on those busier weeks of a February break or a spring break. And they try to accommodate as many students as possible. My recommendation is if you see it is filled to reach out to the admissions office either by email or by phone call and ask what your options are. Sometimes they'll put you on a waiting list to be able to go into those. At times, they can also give you a self-guided tour as well. And I think those can be really, really great too. So don't hesitate to reach out to the admissions office. I always say people in a college admissions offices are some of the nicest people you ever meet in your life. They're truly there because they love working with students. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask them what your options are.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to say also, don't dismiss online tours, even though you're not there
Yes.
for demonstrated interest. If you can't make it out to the school, you can't make as many tours. The online tours can be really well set up. Also, we
Mhm.
talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, but you don't need to tour every single school on your list. That can be really hard to do. So I really recommend to students. Tour a school that's a small liberal arts school, then tour a
Yes.
large university, and then really extrapolate from there. How do you feel about those? And then focus in on those types of schools. And another thing,
Hmm.
just on the topic of tours, I really recommend to students go beyond the tour. If you're on campus and you're taking the tour, but you really want to see the music hall, go see it. Talk to
Right.
students on campus. And I want to echo what Renee said, try to go when school is in session, because I've had students in the past who go in the summer, they get in, they go back during when school's in session and they say, "Oh, this isn't for me. It's too busy, or
Right.
it's not the right things. It's not the right
Hmm.
fit." So,
I have my top two campus visit recommendations are: one, wear comfortable shoes. Those campus tours can be like an hour and a half long, and you're walking. So wear
yeah,
comfortable shoes. And the
right.
second one is to arrive early. It is so challenging to find the right parking lot on college campuses and then try to get into the building on time for the tour. So I always tell families, arrive 15 minutes early, a half an hour early. Give yourself that time to park and walk in and not be like flustered and stressed before you even start the process. Okay, here's another one. The recommendation in yesterday's call was to wait to take the SAT, ACT until a student has taken Algebra 2. If a student took that class as a freshman, which does happen quite a bit, should they consider doing the test earlier in high school? What would your recommendation be for that, Mary Beth?
I would say if they have taken Algebra 2 earlier, they are in a better position to take the test
Hmm.
earlier. That gives them more time to retake if they want to. But I still think there are benefits to waiting for other reasons until they're a little further along in their high school process. Um, or they might take one early and really consider that to be their early score. And
Yes.
then continue to prepare and then to go ahead and take it junior year.
I agree. I think taking it earlier can almost create some test fatigue as well.
Yeah.
I've been taking these for years. Like I think that really rarely would I say that a student, if they took an SAT or an ACT in their sophomore year, would be the score that they were going to be submitting to schools. So I think, sort of getting that sophomore year under your belt, whether you're taking, pre-calc that year or whatever it may be, will just give you even more information and more academic content to be successful.
Yeah, agreed. And remember, they're going to have that PSAT score as well. So
Right.
as a mark, as an early marker.
That's true. That's true. Oh, this is a question I think we talked about a little bit earlier as well. How are pay to play summer programs seen by admissions teams? For example, language immersion, service programs abroad, where a kid is legitimately interested in it, but the family just registers and pays for the spots versus a more selective application process. I think this is a great question. And this is something I know I navigate all the time with the students I'm working with, and we've been talking a lot about this as a college counseling team. There are a lot of different summer programs out there, and right now I think families are feeling this pressure to do these highly selective programs or these programs that are very expensive at selective institutions. And when I'm talking with a student, I make sure that we cover as possibilities for summer programs the full list of possibilities. I have had students who have done, I had a student I worked with last year who went to UCLA for 3 weeks and did explore three different majors, one each week, lived in the dorms, came back, had an amazing experience, learned so much about herself as a person, how to navigate friendships, living in dorms. So it was a wonderful experience for her. I have had another student who created their own business last summer and started a nail business out of her house, learned a ton about business and entrepreneurship. And I have another student who worked at the movie theater all summer. Those are all quality excellent experiences. So it doesn't have to be a summer program where it's very expensive or you have to fly across the country or live in a dorm. All of those experiences are good experiences. Really is what is the right fit for your child. And I have had students who have, for example, last year I worked with a couple of students interested in architecture, and they had both done like architecture programs at some of the colleges that they were interested in. And I did think that that was really interesting for them. They learned about that specific school, what their campus was about, because they were interested in that school, and they did exploration on their academic program. So to me, that made sense. That made sense for that student. But not every family is able to explore these very expensive programs, and there are many, many other things that can be done that are just as valuable and seen just as positively and by an admissions office.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I also think that, a savvy admissions officer is really going to look at, they'll be familiar with the pay to play programs. And if a student is in a lot of those programs, but they're not taking any kind of an active role, they're just there, they're just in the seat. That's really different from somebody who is, starting their own business or doing something where they are taking a leadership and an active position, much more valuable in the application readers estimation. Also, there are a lot of low and no cost programs that, really promote equity. I've put together an extensive list for students because to just, pay $8,000 to go to go to a
Right,
program isn't really first of all, the student isn't really going to grow and learn in a way that they would when they're really, taking a leadership
right,
type.
right, right. I also tell my students, regardless of what you do, like keep a journal about why it was important to you, what you learned from it, how it changed your perspective. I say those three phrases all the time. Um, but because no matter what you have done during the summer, I always draw from those experiences and encourage them to put those in their supplemental essays as well, to really not just show I did this, but what did I learn from it? And really citing some of those experiences they had and when they're doing either their main essay or supplemental essays for schools as well. My daughter's a sophomore and she's interested in medicine and the healthcare field. Are there resources, planning tools, or academic pathways you can recommend that we can access? I would say if any student who's interested in medicine or the healthcare field, I always try to encourage them to do some sort of volunteer work or shadowing, because I think a lot of schools are looking for that opportunity. I had a student last year who was interested in going into nursing. The first year, she actually volunteered at the hospital in the gift shop, but then the next year, she was able to actually go to the patient floors. So starting early, I think is good, and looking into some of those opportunities in your local area is really, really the way to go. And you can also reach out to your guidance office. They might also have resources about what's available in the local area as well. All right, Mary Beth, I'm sending this one your way.
Okay.
Can you share how schools with huge numbers of applications are managing the review process? Is there a first pass done with AI? And I'm just wondering how personal attention to applications is given when the volume is so much larger, especially at some of these larger schools.
Yeah, I can't speak to every school, and I know that AI is becoming more and more of it's used more and more by schools for a couple of things. I think some schools are starting to use it as sort of that first round. As an application should though always have a human person looking at them, and that has always been the way it's done. So I think AI is kind of, we don't really know where it's going to land. It's here, right? But how are schools going to use it? I know some schools are using it to screen essays to make sure students are really writing their own essays. So that's one thing it's
Hmm.
used for. The question went away.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. But I think, sure, like separate from AI, yes, there will be several rounds of looking at an interview. There will be an initial reader who screens it, kind of puts it in a different pile, and then it will go into a different pile, and it may go into several piles before a decision is made. And the review
Mhm.
committees are taking a look at it, and may go from one pile back to another pile. So again, things are shifting and changing as technology We have more and more technology, but there will always be a human reader. The larger the school, the more they're going to rely on things like technology.
Right, I agree. I think a lot of schools right now are using AI to maybe do an initial view of has the student met all the prerequisites for their major, taking a GPA and recalculating it to the school's GPA if they take out, gym and health and things like that. And I agree, a first read and a screening on essays. I think those are probably, but I do think we're going to see more and more of it. But some schools are being very upfront about how they're utilizing it as part of their admissions process, which I think is great. You want to streamline it, but I agree. Feel very strongly about holistic review and having a human look at it. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where things go in the next couple of years. But right now, what I'm seeing is some of the larger schools are using it to speed up their process by taking away some of the manual work that they were doing to fill out review forms and things like that. So this family has an 11th grader who's barely passing Algebra 2 at this time. Should they wait to take the SAT, ACT, summer or fall? So my recommendation is if they're taking Algebra 2 right now and they're an 11th grader and they're struggling with it, I would still look to have them take an SAT or an ACT at some point this spring, whether it be March or May, to get one under their belt so they can see what the test is like, get a baseline where they are at, and then take it again this summer. I typically do not recommend that students take SATs or ACTs in the fall of their senior year. I have had students do that in the past if they're trying to achieve a certain score. And it's very challenging. It is very challenging to navigate senior year with all the exciting things that are happening, getting your college applications submitted, and also trying to do test prep. The students who have done that have very much struggled. So my recommendation is to finish taking your testing before you start in your senior year. But if you're struggling with Algebra 2 at this point, I would really put time and energy into doing as well as possible in that class. Take them in the spring, see what your scores are, and then make a determination about when you will take your next set of scores and how you will prep for that, whether it be one-on-one, doing it yourself, or working with a one-on-one test coach. Okay, if a student has a very good ACT score, 32, versus an SAT, 1270, is it necessary to repeat the SAT or just go with the ACT, which in our state makes them eligible for a governor's award of $10,000 per year? You want to tackle that, Mary Beth?
Yeah, I would say definitely just stay with the ACT. You don't need to get like Pete was talking about yesterday. You don't need to be in two different lanes. So I would stick with
Mhm.
the ACT score, the added benefit of the governor's award eligibility, and if they want, I mean, 32 is really good, but they could, if they're going to study for anything or take anything again, I would say take the ACT again.
I agree. I agree. What kind of accommodations are there for high anxiety? I will tell you that I have worked with students in the past that have had a lot of anxiety. Actually worked with a younger student this year who was in 8th grade. And then I worked with them in 9th grade, and she actually was taking the PSAT and wanted to do test prep for the PSAT, which is the first time I've ever had a family ask me that. So I actually reached out to Pete, who presented with me yesterday, and he said that he had done test prep for the PSAT. And, when I asked the family why they wanted to do that, the father's answer was, I want to empower her to feel confident going into the test. And it lowers her anxiety if she knows what to expect. And I thought that was such a great answer. And so, as far as having anxiety, prepping for the test, preparing for the test, knowing what to expect, I think that can lower the stress level for a student. I don't know specifically if there are accommodations for high anxiety. Do you know, Mary Beth? Have you ever worked with someone who has requested accommodations for that?
Well, I would say the route for that, if you haven't already done so, is to talk
Guidance
to the
office.
school counselor, talk to the learning
Hmm.
specialist at the
Yes.
school, and talk about getting a 504 accommodation, which would involve documentation and a lot of other things. But if the anxiety is acute enough that it's really affecting their ability to perform as well as they would otherwise, and I'm assuming it is, then I would go with that path as one
Hmm.
path. Now, that's going to allow for some executive functioning, some relaxation things in the school, possibly depending on the school. But there are things that you can do that don't require to get an actual 504 thing, just to help that student with their anxiety. So, stress management, again, things with which is part of executive functioning. So, yeah, that's a hard one. I think it affects more and more students. We live in a pretty
I
crazy world,
agree.
and I think a lot of students are really affected by anxiety. I think we have an epidemic of it, especially and a lot of times, unfortunately, around the college search.
Yeah. I also had a student I worked with this past year who didn't take his SATs or ACTs. He did have anxiety, and I didn't start working with them until he was a senior. They had already made that decision as a family. That is not typically my recommendation. I always tell students, I think Jen and I spoke about this on Monday, like take the test. Let's see how you do. Let's get one under your belt. Let's talk about, if you'll take it again. But I recommend everyone take the test. But I did start working with this family later in the process, and they had already made that decision as a family. And I will tell you, it did limit us in some ways in what colleges that he was applying to, because some of the schools he was interested in were test score required, and so those were not schools that he could apply to. So it is sort of a holistic conversation, and you want to talk about that. But I like that they're sort of bringing it up and saying, okay, would this be possible? And I appreciate the information that you shared, Mary Beth. I think that's a great idea to talk with the guidance office or the support services at your school. Do you have a student in which the ACT or SAT scores will not affect where they will apply? Does that change the recommend? Oh, here we're going almost in the same thing. Does that change the recommendations regarding possibly taking the ACT or SAT in the fall of senior year, but within the time to submit the early application? The student is challenged in simultaneously studying for the SAT and the ACT during the school year, which goes until mid-June in the Pacific Northwest, and would like to have more time focusing on studying in the summer. I would say I don't recommend it, but there are students who will take it in the fall and with good reason. There is typically an SAT in October, there is an ACT in September, so those are good choices, just at the beginning of school. It is what I find the most challenging in working with students is when they take the October scores and then they're holding their applications and they can't submit them until they get their scores back to know whether they will go test optional or not. So, having those applications all held to the last week of October so we could have conversations about test score submissions is challenging and stressful. And I try to make everything as least stressful as possible in this process. But if this is what the student wants to do, of course, I will support them and help them navigate through that process.
And I would add to that if a student is planning on applying early action, which can have some benefits,
Hmm.
then they really want to consider the test holding that up as well.
I
If it's
agree.
too late, yep.
Okay, if moving to Europe, I may want to have my kids come back for college. What's the best international high school track for getting in? IB, British, hybrid. Assume American would be best, but other country specific degrees would be most clunky. Do you have information, like, do you have a knowledgeable background, Mary Beth, on evaluating international
But, you
schools
know,
when you
I
worked in
have
admissions?
I have some, but I don't want to misspeak here and give
Hmm.
inaccurate information.
Sure.
I would say though the IB and British curriculums are, really well known with U.S. schools. Admissions evaluators, is an international committee who will be really well versed at looking at these. I would say go with the best option that you have in your community in Europe. Um,
Hmm.
and let's see here, assume American would be most.
I agree with you, Mary Beth. I think your advice is sound. Most admissions professionals are very used to navigating the IB process. But I will tell you, every admissions office will have staff that are trained to evaluate international transcripts. So there is always a resource on hand, whether it be an international admissions office or an international team within an undergraduate admissions office. Very common that students are applying from other countries. So it's not unusual at all. It's a very typical part of the admissions process. So I would, definitely, if you're going to move over there, pursue what works best for your child, but know that every admissions office will have staff that will be able to evaluate that. Okay, agree. We did one yesterday and had that experience with my grandson. Oh, I think they might be talking about the campus tour. I think Karen wrote in and said she agreed. She did a campus tour yesterday and had that experience with the grandson. He got so much out of it. Also met with a department chair and one of the professors. I love when students are able to do that.
Yeah.
I had a family this year that they would never schedule anything, but they would do they'd do the campus tour and they schedule that, but then they would always wander the halls in the academic building. The student was interested in engineering. And every single school they visited, they ended up bumping into somebody, asking some questions. They got tours of facilities. They had to do so many different things, which I think is amazing. And it was so impactful on how that student walked away feeling about that school. When in doubt, I always say, schedule ahead of time if you can. Call the admissions office and say, I'm interested in computer science. Is there someone in the department I can meet with? Are there facilities available for me to tour? Many, many colleges have those available, so don't hesitate to ask for that. All right, it looks like we have one more question, and we're at 12:44. This has worked out perfectly.
By fast.
Yes. Okay. So, it looks like we have one more in the chat as well. So I'm going to address that after this one. Aside from touring a campus, what are some additional actions a student can take to show their strong interest in a school? So really talking about demonstrated interest here.
Yeah.
Does it matter if they follow the school on social media, attend a summer program or campus, on campus, et cetera? So first, let's talk about what demonstrated interest is. So demonstrated interest is if a school uses demonstrated interest, they do track how many interactions they have with a student. And they do utilize that to determine how likely that student may be to enroll on that campus. Some colleges use demonstrated interest, some do not use it at all. And we have some resources through College Planner Pro, which is the software we use to know whether a college utilizes demonstrated interest. So in doing demonstrated, if a college utilizes demonstrated interest, there are a number of things that can be taken into consideration. And that can be obviously campus tours, interacting with someone on campus, doing a summer program. Of course, those are tracked. Some colleges will track if you follow them on social media. Some colleges will track if you open the emails that they send you. And some even go as far to track if you click on a link inside the email that they send you. Many colleges also track how many times you log into your admissions portal once you set up your application. If you've attended a webinar, there's so many different things. So once students I'm working with apply, I normally set up a Google Doc for them with, here's your applications that you've submitted. Do you have your admissions portal set up so they have a place to track that? Does the school take demonstrated interest into consideration? And is an interview also part that they take into consideration? So they have it all in one spot. In the schools that take demonstrated interest into consideration, I recommend that they, log into their portal often, check their emails, just to, as a way to show that school you're very interested in them.
Yeah, one caveat with the summer programs, don't assume that if a summer program is just housed on a campus, that it's going to get you into that school. I think University of Chicago is the outlier there, but it's just housed on the campus. It doesn't mean it's like connected to that campus in any way for many summer programs.
Yes, that's a great point. That is a great point. And many times departments on campus will host events, but don't actually funnel that information to the admissions office. It may be an entire separate event. So that's a really great point. We did have one question come through email, so I want to address that before we signed off today, Marybeth. My daughter does a lot of work with climate change and trying to get climate education in the school curriculum. She's met with principals, local leaders, and sometimes her goals aren't achieved because a lot of red tape, not a surprise. How do you recommend she highlight this work on her college application?
Well, that's a great question. And good for her for doing that. This is an area that I have an interest in as well. Um, I would say well, obviously she wants to find that common thread that runs throughout and really highlight it as a cohesive story that she's done a lot with climate change. I would say anything that she can do, and I don't have the question in front of me, and I need to see things. But I would say anything she can do beyond if she can write a research paper about it and get it published, that is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Write about it in her essays, obviously put it in her activities list. But anything she can do to have that cohesive story and to really, as far as she's comfortable, do more and more leadership types of positions with that topic and go beyond the high school too. Do what you need to do in high school. And again, I don't have the question in front of me, but go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree. And I think, I mean, obviously, I think utilizing it as her personal statement or her college essay would be outstanding. Really
yeah,
highlight the things that she's done in there because that is significant. And then as well, maybe using different things that she has done as the process as for some of her supplemental essays. Most colleges will look at the personal statement in the Common App, but not every college does. And many colleges have some follow-up supplemental essays that they have to write. And talking about all the different things that she's done to work through that process, especially some of the challenges she's overcome, can really, I think, be very interesting and unique answers to some of those questions that they wouldn't see from every student.
right. And
And
really
then
show.
yeah, yeah. And the last thing I would say is create a resume and have all of that information on a resume. Some colleges will allow you to upload a resume as part of the application process. And those that don't, I always have students keep them on hand when they're visiting colleges anytime that they interact with an admissions staff member or department member to give them that resume as sort of a talking point to share some of the things that they've done. Well, this was great. I'm really excited. We got a lot of questions today. So I want to thank everyone for coming, not just today, but for the entire college week. I know it was a lot of information, and I truly hope that you're all walking away feeling more confident about approaching this process. But if you are feeling stressed, as we had a few number fives at the beginning saying that they were still very stressed, know that we are here to help. You can learn more about our programs by scanning this QR code and being connected with one of our education specialists. Kathy, Jennifer, and Ann Stewart are all amazing. They're wonderful about talking with students about their child and helping them navigate the journey and also connecting them with the best fit for support or for counseling if that's what they're looking for. Thank you for joining us this week, and I hope you all enjoyed it very much. Just so you're aware, as you close out from this presentation, there will be a short survey. So if you have a moment to provide us with your feedback, we would very much appreciate it so that we can use that information to improve any future webinars that we have. So thanks again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks, Renee, for
Oh,
everything you've
and
done
thank
this
you, Mary Beth.
week.
Not just for today, but for being here this week.
You've
So
been
you shared
amazing
some,
all week.
yeah, you
Yeah.
shared some great information and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.